For weeks, she kept her head down while the whole school made her the punchline. But when she finally picked up the phone and called her dad, everything changed. Janiah Rhodes didn't mind the smell of oil or the clang of wrenches on concrete. While other kids went to the mall or sat on TikTok after school, she was in the back of her dad's workshop in Mobile, Alabama, hands deep in the hood of a 2006 Ford Escape, watching how the engine clicked and hissed when the ignition caught. She didn't think much of it. It felt normal. Her dad, Darius, better known to locals as Rhino, owned Rhodes Auto Repair, a modest but busy garage on Dauphin Island Parkway. The place didn't look like much from the outside, but regulars knew it was one of the few shops in town where you got honest work and didn't leave feeling robbed. Janiah had grown up around rusted mufflers, half-eaten fast food on tool benches, and old men who always had something to say about the good old days. But what she loved most was watching her dad work. He was fast, patient, and never talked down to her. He'd say, "Johnny, this right here, this ain't just fixing. It's problem solving. Every engine's got a story. You just gotta listen to it." By the time she was 14, she could change brake pads blindfolded. Customers started recognizing her, asking for her by name. They'd laugh, surprised, and then get real quiet when she actually fixed their stuff better than the part-time guys. It made her proud, but that pride didn't follow her to school. At Willowbrook High, being a mechanic, or even looking like one, was social suicide, especially for a girl, especially for a black girl. Janiah kept to herself. She wore the same boots she used in the shop. Her nails were short and always had a little grease in the creases. She didn't care about makeup or TikTok dances or who was wearing what. Her mind stayed on torque wrenches and fluid leaks. It didn't take long for people to notice. She was sitting in the cafeteria one Thursday when it started. "Hey, Junkyard Barbie!" A voice called from behind. She turned and saw Brady Colton, blonde, always grinning like he was in a frat house instead of a high school, holding up a video on his phone. It was her, filmed from behind the bushes near the garage, wiping sweat from her forehead with the inside of her elbow. "She changing tires or changing oil on her face?" he joked. His crew cackled. Someone shouted, "Yo, she gonna fix the school bus next?" Janiah didn't flinch. She looked Brady dead in the eye, then turned back to her food. No emotion, just like her dad taught her. Don't flinch unless it's fire or family, but that was only the beginning. The next day she opened her locker to find it filled with nuts and bolts. A little sign taped inside read, "Certified Grease Monkey." The hauls weren't violent, not yet, but they were sharp. Words can be weapons too. Whispers floated around her like smoke. Quiet laughs when she passed by. Mock car noises in the gym. Someone revving an invisible engine every time she answered a question in class. She didn't tell her dad. Partly because she knew what he'd do, but mostly because she didn't want to give Brady and his crew the satisfaction. They didn't matter, she told herself. What mattered was that feeling when the engine started up after she fixed something nobody else could. Still, it stung. She felt it most when she walked down the halls alone, hands in her pockets, pretending not to hear the boys behind her coughing out fake car sounds. And the worst part? No one stopped it. Teachers looked, then looked away. Girls who used to chat with her about sneakers now avoided eye contact. The more they laughed, the smaller she felt. But Janiah wasn't small. Not really. She just hadn't realized how big her world would become. But all of that changed the day a certain black SUV pulled up in front of Willowbrook High. It started off as jokes, little comments, quick glances. But in high school, the line between teasing and cruelty disappears fast, especially when someone like Brady Colton decides you're an easy target. Brady wasn't the kind of kid who got in trouble. He smiled in front of teachers, wore khakis on Fridays, and called grown-ups "sir" like he meant it. But behind closed doors, or more often in Snapchat group chats, he was something else entirely. Once he noticed Janiah, it became a game. Every morning, as students filed into homeroom, Brady would slap a wrench against the side of his desk and say, "Yo, Jania, you forget your toolbox." It got a few laughs at first. Nervous ones. The kind you hear when people aren't sure if they should laugh or look away. But then it snowballed. Soon, a video made its way around school. It showed Brady and two of his friends, Kyle and Trent, standing in front of an old Honda Civic in someone's driveway, dressed in cheap overalls and clownish goggles, pretending to be Rhodes Auto Repair Junior Division. They took turns smearing each other with chocolate syrup, pretending it was motor oil. One of them held up a Barbie doll with dirt all over her face and yelled, "It's me, Jania! I'm the Queen of Greece!" The video hit TikTok late at night. By morning it was all over school. Even teachers whispered about it. No one said her name out loud, but everyone knew. Jania saw it during fourth period when a girl behind her started laughing so hard she dropped her pen. She didn't watch the whole thing. She didn't need to. Her stomach already felt like it was full of nails. That afternoon, she walked home instead of catching the bus. She didn't want to hear the whispers. She didn't want to see anyone. She just wanted to disappear. When she got home, her dad was in the garage, polishing an old set of rims. He looked up, grinned like always. "Hey, Johnny girl, want to finish that Altima with me?" She smiled. Just a little. "In a bit. I got homework." He nodded and went back to work. Jania headed to her room and sat on her bed for a long time. The smell of motor oil still clung to her shirt, but now it made her feel sick. She hated feeling like that, hated that they made her feel ashamed of something she loved, that they'd turned her strength into a punchline. The next few days got worse. One morning she opened her locker and found a photo taped to the inside. It was her, bent over a car engine, hair tied back, grease on her cheek. Someone had drawn cartoon stink lines coming off her and written, "Miss Mobile Motorhead" underneath. She stared at it for a second, then calmly took it down, folded it in half, and shoved it into her pocket. She didn't cry. Not at school. Never at school, but at home. Lying in the dark, she'd stare at the ceiling and wonder why people hated what they didn't understand. Why doing something useful, something honest, made her a target. It wasn't just about the jokes. It was the way no one stood up for her. The way people she'd helped with homework now looked away when she walked past. How being herself suddenly became weird the moment someone decided it wasn't cool. Her science teacher, Mrs. Bledsoe, noticed the change. She pulled Jania aside after class one day and said, "Everything okay, sweetheart? You've been quiet lately." Jania forced a smile. "I'm good, just tired." Mrs. Bledsoe hesitated, clearly not buying it. But she didn't push. That night, her dad found her sitting in the driveway, staring at the stars with a socket wrench in her hand. He sat beside her. "You ever fix something?" she said. "And it just breaks again right after." He looked at her for a long second. "Yeah, all the time. Doesn't mean it wasn't worth fixing." She didn't say anything. Just held on to that wrench like it was the only thing that made sense. But silence doesn't hold forever, not when the pressure keeps climbing. And for Jania, it was about to hit a breaking point. By the next week, Jania had stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria. She started bringing a peanut butter sandwich and apple slices from home, sitting behind the gym bleachers during lunch break. Alone. It was quieter there. No videos. No whispers. Just the low hum of traffic from Dauphin Street and the distant thud of basketballs echoing from the gym. She'd scroll through her phone, checking messages she didn't reply to. No one really reached out anymore. A few classmates she'd done group projects with still followed her, but none of them liked her posts or checked in. Her world had shrunk down to 3 places: home, school, and the shop. At home, her dad still laughed, still told stories about back in the day when people would drive a car till the wheels begged for mercy. Jania smiled when he did. But more and more, she stayed quiet. He noticed, but didn't press. Not yet. Then on Friday morning, she opened Instagram and her stomach dropped. Someone had created a fake account called Garage Princess for Real. The profile photo was a distorted picture of her in overalls, eyes red from a bad filter. The bio said, Fixing cars since birth. Grease is my perfume. Ask me about your engine, baby. The account had posted 6 videos already, all of them clips taken from inside the garage. Blurry phone footage of her working, bending over the hood, wiping her hands, tying up her hair. Some even had voiceovers mocking her movements. The account had almost 500 followers. Kids from her school were tagging each other in the comments, laughing. She wanted to throw her phone. Instead, she turned it off, slid it into her backpack, and stared at the whiteboard in first period until her eyes burned. She didn't tell anyone. Not her dad, not a teacher, not even Mrs. Bledsoe, who kept asking if she wanted to talk. Because what would she say? That a bunch of teenagers decided she wasn't allowed to be different? That she couldn't fight back without making it worse? So she swallowed it down, again. But something cracked later that day. She was walking down the hallway, heading to her locker, when she passed a group of boys near the vending machine. One of them made a loud hissing noise like steam from an engine. Another added, "Yo, don't stand too close. You'll get axle grease on your shoes." She turned and faced them. "What's your problem?" she asked, voice flat. The tallest one, Nick something, smirked. Didn't know mechanics could talk. Before she could respond, a teacher walked by, and they scattered. She stood there for a second, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the kind of anger that comes when you've been quiet too long. Later that night, her dad walked into her room holding a flyer. "The school's career day is next Thursday," he said. "You want to come represent the shop with me? Might be fun." She looked up at him from her desk. Her hand froze mid-sentence in her notebook. "Career day?" she repeated. "Yeah, I already told him I'd speak." "But you'd be the star. Come on, Johnny. You know more than half those kids about real work." She hesitated. "I don't know, Dad." He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "They're gonna hear from lawyers, doctors, dentists. Why not someone who knows what to do when your truck dies on the interstate at midnight?" She let out a breath. "I'll think about it." He nodded, smiled, and left. She didn't think about it, not that night. Instead, she lay awake, imagining every way that day could go wrong. Brady filming her, people laughing, teachers pretending not to notice. Still, part of her wanted to go. Part of her wanted to show them she wasn't some joke. The next morning, her locker was empty for the first time in weeks. No notes, no car parts, no pictures, just silence. It felt worse than the teasing, because silence meant they were waiting, for what she didn't know. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means something is coming, and Jania was about to find herself at the center of it. It was the Wednesday before career day. Jania had spent most of the afternoon in the garage replacing a timing belt on a Dodge Charger. She'd gotten it done under her dad's supervision, start to finish, and even tightened a loose exhaust mount he hadn't noticed. He gave her a quiet nod and said, "That's you, Johnny. That's all you." She felt a flicker of something, almost pride, but it faded fast as she remembered what was waiting for her tomorrow. She hadn't decided whether she was going to stand beside her dad on that stage. She wanted to, but the thought of facing those faces, of hearing them laugh, whisper, film, made her stomach tighten. The next day at school, she kept her head down. She was heading to biology when it happened. A group of boys had been waiting outside the science wing. Brady stood in the middle of them, holding a beat-up Barbie doll covered in black shoe polish and wearing overalls cut from denim scraps. Someone had even attached a mini wrench to its hand with duct tape. "Look, everybody!" Brady called out. "Garage princess in the flesh!" Before she could react, he tossed the doll at her feet. It landed face down, right in front of her boots. For a second, no one moved. Then came the laughter, loud, harsh, uncontrollable. Girls, boys, even someone from the soccer team. Phones were out, cameras were recording, and all she could do was stare at that doll, her hands clenched into fists, her throat tight. She bent down slowly, picked it up, and looked at it. The fake grease, the crooked smile, the stupid tool taped to its plastic hand. Something inside her cracked. Not loud, Not explosive. Just enough. She turned around without a word, walked to the front office, and asked to call her father. When he picked up, she didn't even say hello. She just whispered, "Can you come?" He didn't ask why. He just said, "Be there in 10. Jania sat in the front office, staring at the wall, the doll still in her lap. The secretary offered her water, but she shook her head. She didn't need comfort. She needed air. 10 minutes later, she heard it. The low growl of tires. She looked through the glass and saw a sleek black SUV pull into the school lot. It was spotless, shining like it had just rolled off a dealership floor. And then the door opened. Her father stepped out. But he wasn't in his usual garage clothes. No oil-stained jeans, no faded ball cap. He wore a tailored dark grey jacket, black slacks, and a collared shirt that looked expensive. His shoulders looked broader than usual. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't smiling. Inside, the whispers started almost immediately. "Is that? No way. That's her dad?" Someone actually gasped when he walked through the front doors. Darius Rhodes stood in the middle of the office lobby, looked right at Jania, and opened his arms. She walked over, hugged him, and whispered, "They don't even know who you are." He smiled. Not a full smile, just enough. "They about to." The principal came out of her office, surprised. "Mr. Rhodes, we weren't expecting you until—" "I know," he said calmly. "But I need 5 minutes. With the students." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "We can make that happen." Within 10 minutes, an announcement came over the speakers calling all students to the auditorium. Some of them were already there, watching through classroom windows as Darius walked beside Jania toward the front doors. He didn't hold her hand. He didn't need to. She walked just a step behind, but her chin was higher than it had been in weeks. They entered the auditorium together. Students whispered. Phones were already filming. Brady and his crew looked frozen in their seats. And when Darius stepped up to the microphone, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold. He didn't threaten. He just said, "My name is Darius Rhodes. Some of y'all know me from football. Some of y'all been to my shop. But none of that matters right now. What matters is this. There's a girl in this school who wakes up early, gets her hands dirty, works hard, and knows more about engines than most grown men. And that girl? She's sitting right there. That's my daughter." He pointed to Jania, sitting in the front row. She didn't move. She doesn't care what you wear or who you pretend to be online. She's too busy learning how to do something real. I raised her not to chase approval, but to do the job right. And if any of y'all got a problem with that, maybe you need to check your engine first. But Darius didn't come just to make a speech. He came to change the way they saw her. And it was only just beginning. The auditorium stayed quiet long after Darius stepped away from the mic. Not the usual awkward, fill the silence kind of quiet. This was different. Like everyone had just realized they'd been staring at something through foggy glass, and it suddenly cleared. Jania sat in the front row, heart thumping, eyes fixed on the floor. Not because she was afraid, not even embarrassed, but because she couldn't believe what just happened. Her dad wasn't a man who sought attention. He let his work speak for itself. But in 5 minutes, he'd said more than any viral video or locker room joke ever could. And he hadn't done it to impress anyone. He did it to protect her, to stand beside her without ever taking the spotlight away from her. The principal walked back up to the stage. "Thank you, Mr. Rhodes," she said into the mic. "We'll resume our regular schedule now. And students, I'd like to remind you that online harassment and targeted bullying are violations of our school code and will not be tolerated." That last line had weight, more than it usually did. Brady, still sitting dead center in the back row, looked pale. His crew suddenly seemed smaller. Phones lowered. Conversations were quieter. No one laughed. Jania stood up, turned toward the doors, and walked straight out, shoulders square, face calm. She didn't speak until she and her dad were outside. "You didn't have to say all that," she mumbled. He chuckled. "Didn't do it for them? Did it so you'd remember?" She paused, then smiled. just a little. But the real shift happened in the days after. The fake Instagram account? Deleted. Gone. Word spread that the school had traced it back to a senior using a fake VPN. Brady never confirmed or denied it was him, but the teachers were suddenly a lot more interested in who was behind the videos. A few days later, Jania walked past a group of students near the vending machines. One of the girls, someone she barely knew, gave her a small wave. She blinked, nodded back, and kept walking. In history class, another student slid a sticky note onto her desk. It read, "If you ever start a garage, let me know. My mom's car's always acting up." She didn't respond, but she didn't throw it away either. Even some of the teachers shifted how they looked at her. Mr. Keyes, who taught algebra, asked her about the torque values needed for changing spark plugs during a lesson on equations. The class laughed, but not at her. For once, it felt like they were laughing with her. She still wore the same boots, still had grease under her fingernails most days. But the way people looked at her was different now, not because her dad had money or fame, but because she'd never pretended to be anything other than herself. And now they'd seen what that actually meant. Career day finally came. Her dad was on the schedule, but when the principal asked if Jania wanted to speak for a minute too, he looked at her and said, "Up to you." She thought about it, then nodded. When she stepped up to the podium in the gym, holding a small piece of paper, the crowd quieted. "I work with my dad at Rhodes Auto," she said. "I've been doing it since I was 9. People think it's just fixing cars, but it's really about paying attention, listening to what's off, figuring out how to make it right. It's the same with people, honestly." She paused, then looked up. "I used to think being different made me weird, but now I think maybe different just means ahead." She walked off stage to a silence that felt respectful this time. No snickering, no whispers, just a few nods. Real one. Outside after the event, a boy from her English class approached her. His name was Devin. Quiet kid, always drawing cars in the margins of his notebook. He looked nervous. "Hey, that was cool. What you said. I think about stuff like that too. But I'm not brave enough to say it." She raised an eyebrow. "You fix cars?" He shrugged. "I mean, I mess with my cousin's go-kart sometimes, but nothing serious." She smiled. "That's how it starts." But what really mattered wasn't the speech, or even the silence that followed. It was that Jania had finally been seen for who she really was. Not just a girl in a garage, but a girl with purpose. And purpose is louder than ridicule, every time. By the following week, things had settled. Not returned to normal, because normal meant hiding, but settled into something more honest. Jania walked through the school halls without flinching. People still whispered sometimes, but not the same way. The laughter had stopped, and in its place was something more curious, more cautious. A few students even started asking her real questions. "Yo, Jania, my mom's Camry's making this weird clicking sound, like right after it starts up. What do you think that could be?" She'd smirk, barely looking up from her locker. "Could be the starter. Could be your motor mounts. Tell her to bring it in." On Thursdays after school, she started tutoring one of the younger girls. Ariana, a quiet freshman who didn't talk much but loved watching Jania sketch engine parts in her notebook. They sat in the back of the library, Jania explaining thermodynamics in plain language, while Ariana scribbled notes like her life depended on it. At home, her dad seemed lighter, not because the bullying had stopped, but because his daughter had stood up, endured it, and came out stronger. They spent their weekends working together, side by side, radio humming, tools scattered like old friends on the workbench. One Saturday afternoon, he leaned back against the hood of a Chevy Tahoe and said, "You know, I used to worry this place would be too small for you." She looked up from the toolbox. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because you think bigger than wrenches and spark plugs. You see things all the way through." She didn't say anything for a moment, just tightened a bolt, slow and steady. "Maybe that's why I like engines," she finally said. "You figure out what's wrong, fix it, and it works. Not like people." He chuckled. People take longer, but the ones worth keeping? You fix those too. Just gotta know when. The following Monday at school, something unexpected happened. Brady Colton, yep, that Brady, approached her by the vending machine. She noticed him before he spoke. He wasn't walking like he used to. No smirk. No swagger. Just a kid who looked like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long. "Hey," he said. She didn't respond. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I was a jerk. Probably still am. But I shouldn't have done all that stuff. It wasn't funny." She stared at him. Not mean. Not angry. Just quiet. After a few seconds, she said, "No, it wasn't." He nodded. "Yeah. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just wanted to say that." Then he turned and walked away. She didn't feel satisfaction. Not really. Just a strange sort of peace, like seeing someone finally admit the truth. Out loud, gave her the freedom to let it go. Later that day, as she walked out of the building, she saw a small crowd gathered by the senior parking lot. Someone's car wouldn't start. She kept walking, then stopped. Turned around, walked over. "Pop the hood," she said. The girl, senior, cheerleader, never spoken to Jania before, looked surprised, but did what she was told. 10 minutes later, the engine turned over like nothing had ever happened. "Battery cable was loose," Jania said. "Might want to get that checked. Could short out your alternator if it keeps slipping." The girl blinked. "Thanks. Seriously, you're like amazing at this." Jania just smiled. Not cocky, just calm. "It's what I do." That night, she and her dad ate dinner on the back porch, plates balanced on their knees. He looked over and said, "So, you think you'll take over the shop one day?" She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll design engines for airplanes, or run a school that teaches girls how to weld." He raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious?" "Not really," she said. "Just tired of people acting surprised when I know what I'm doing." He laughed. A deep, proud laugh. She looked out into the yard, stars just starting to flicker above the trees. "People underestimate what they don't understand," she said. "But they don't get to decide who I am. I do." And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Not to her classmates, not to Brady, not to anyone. Because she already had. And in the end, Jania Rhodes wasn't just the girl from the garage. She was proof that real strength doesn't come from attention or approval. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that away. Life didn't magically transform for Jania after that. People didn't suddenly line up to be her best friend. Not every teacher gave her special treatment. She still had off days, still got oil on her jeans, still missed questions on math quizzes when she didn't study. She was 14. Nobody perfects life at 14. But something fundamental had shifted. She no longer walked through school hallways trying to take up less space. She didn't shrink when people looked her way. She didn't hesitate to answer in class. And most importantly, she didn't hide what made her different. Because that difference, it was never the problem. The real problem was the people who thought she had to fit into their version of normal to be worthy of respect. She learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight back or shout louder. Sometimes the strongest move is to keep being who you are, even when others try to make that feel small. That takes more guts than any viral prank. It takes more strength than popularity. It takes belief, and Jania had that now. Not because her dad showed up in a fancy SUV, not because her classmates got caught, but because she realized her worth was never measured by their approval. Her story started with a girl under a car hood, covered in grease, happy to spend her afternoons with her dad. That same girl walked through fire, mocked, filmed, picked apart, and came out stronger. Not bitter, not hardened, just sure of herself. That's something they couldn't take away. And the truth is, we all know someone like Jania. Maybe it's your little cousin who likes computers instead of sports. Maybe it's the kid in your art class who wears thrifted clothes and paints during lunch. Maybe it's you. If you've ever been laughed at for doing something different, something real, this story was meant for you. There's nothing wrong with being quiet, or focused, or passionate about something most people don't understand. That's not weird. That's brave. Let them laugh. Let them whisper, but never let them change who you are. And if you're the one who's ever laughed at someone else, just ask yourself, why did their confidence bother you? People only mock what they fear or fail to understand. Janaya showed that by staying grounded, by fixing what was broken. On engines, yes, but also in herself, in her school, in the way others viewed her. There's a lesson in that for all of us. Respect isn't something you wait for, it's something you carry. So whatever your version of the garage is, music, writing, coding, baking, fashion, gardening, building things with your bare hands, hold on to it. Defend it. Because the world doesn't need more people trying to be the same. It needs people who are bold enough to stay different, even when the world laughs. That's what Janaya taught us. Not just how to change a flat tire or spot a leaky radiator, but how to stand tall when the world tries to shrink you. How to move forward, with your head up, even when your hands are dirty. How to know that sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is unapologetically yourself. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. Maybe they're sitting alone at lunch. Maybe they're thinking of giving up. Maybe they've forgotten that their difference is a gift. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We've got more real stories that show the strength in ordinary people, because sometimes the quiet ones have the loudest hearts.